Perfect. Thanks for having me. Basically, what we've been doing is I've been working at the use of AI and where to begin with the utilization of AI in your pedagogical practice. So, as a teacher, I still have a couple of teaching hours on my timetable. I wanted to know, what does it look like about using AI in your classroom? We're not escaping it. Learners are going to come across it. So, we kind of almost have some form of duty to kind of guide that in an ethical way. So my intent to be using AI with learners is the goal was to have AI support learners' autonomy with learning and support educational growth. So I want them to go away, them to use AI just as much as we are with our work and the tasks that we do, which we've all shared today. I want them to go away and be able to use it with their learning ability. So they have a direction and an understanding of how to do that. So I sequenced AI teaching based on a spiral sequence design. So we would revisit topics over and over again, and every time we revisited those topics, it would become a little bit more difficult to understand in order to grow their learning on AI and how it fits within their learning. I synthesize this with Rose and Shine's principles, so we use a lot of recall to ensure that memorable learning was happening, deeper learning was happening as well, especially with the spiral sequence design of the schema learning. But what I did have to be very wary of is the artificial intelligence paradox. So for those that don't know, it's essentially, there was a study done where learners used AI and they did really, really well in their assignments. But when it came to exams, they couldn't recall that information. So I had to be really, really considerate that that possibly could happen. I use this with my T-level learners now. Through formative assessment, this is done through assignment type, but in their summative assessment, it's all exam. So we kind of had very little room for error here. I utilized, so the journal at the bottom there of the page, I utilized this for about how to build it in. This study looked at building AI into curriculum throughout high schools, and they looked at the technology that learners have access to, which is smartphones, the types of AI functions they had, which basically was ChatGPT. So this is kind of what we used in order to support the learners. So that was kind of my intent. Now, my implementation, so my approach to this was I started off teaching about the ethical use of AI. Now, this isn't essentially just the do's and the don'ts of what they should do and what they shouldn't do. You know, if you try and tell a teenager not to press the big red button, what are they going to do? Press the big red button. So we started to look at their ontologies and look at their values and what made up their core beliefs of whether they should or shouldn't use it. We started to then look at ethical approaches. So we built in some consequentialism and utilitarianism. We looked at the virtue ethics and a deontological approach. And with all the learners understanding all of these big words that have, you know, quite simple meanings, we looked at how they can start to approach AI and and they built their own essentially best practice, the routes to best practice we called it, and they built their own what they think they shouldn't be doing with the AI through their assignments. So once we kind of got that, we spent a few weeks on that. Once we moved on to tools for success, we were being very conscious of our tangible roots of best practice that each individual built. They were completely unique to the individual based off their values and ethics. And we taught them to embrace AI as a partner as opposed to a replacement. And this kind of fed quite neatly into our prompt writing. We had a conversational approach. A lot of learners were using ChatGPT as a search engine. So we taught them to kind of have a conversation with the AI. And this also kind of supported them treating it as a partner as opposed to a replacement. And then what the learners would do is they would research and review the answers that were given. Again, as part of the tools, we looked at AI. We evaluated it. We looked at the good and bad. We knew it was biased. We knew it could give wrong information as it pulls from a wide source. So that review and research was a really important aspect. And then our third point was assess, review, and refine. So I assessed the learners using AI. Now, to avoid the artificial intelligence paradox, I asked the learners to use AI to create their assignment task. So for example, what we did is we used a scenario-based situation and we looked at ethical farming practices. So when they put into the chat GPT, they put create me a scenario based on this, they would then use what the AI is kicked out, and they would describe, they would highlight where it's evaluated, they would analyze it so that they're not skipping over those command verbs. The AI is doing the work for them in terms of creating something for them then to use in their learning. And then once that work was submitted, I marked that, I gave them feedback, which was part of the review, and then refined the approach. And towards the end, I did an anonymous questionnaire, and this led me to get some results, which is my impact. So I've only pulled 2 out of the 10 questions due to our time constraints today, but I'm happy to share the results with more people if they needed. But in graph 1, my question was, I'm more independent in my learning with the use of AI. Now from this, we can see that there are no negative impacts of AI on learning. None of them said strongly disagree or disagree. We've got a third neutral, a third agree, and a third strongly agree. So we've got kind of a positive trend going on here. And then the second graph that I picked was how dependent are you on AI? Because I was quite conscious that we could have some issues kicking in where they can't live without it. And we know in their exams, they're not going to have it. So I kind of wanted to capture this data, and I thought this was quite important. 1 being never use it, and then 10 being quite a high need. And we can see with the line of best fit, there's a downward trend. So we can extrapolate from this that we're not heading in the direction of it being really needed to complete a piece of work. We can see 26%, so a quarter of the class, we can see that they're sitting at 5, which is use it but don't rely on it, which is what I was kind of expecting, and it's quite nice that that data is sitting there. So thanks everyone for listening. I am from the animal department, so if ever you find yourself at Wythenshawe and want to come and see the animals, which everyone normally does, please get in touch. But over to you, Nick. Thank you.